Good morning, Susan. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. It's so lovely to see you. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful. It was a great weekend. Thanks. How about you?
It was nice. We spent it outside for a good portion of it. Wanted to take advantage of probably one of our nicest weekends that we'll have for a while.
That's right. Yeah, everyone's even more precious now, right?
Yes, yes. So I want to say good morning to all of you. Welcome to Designing Healthy Environments. I am so happy to be joined by Susan Stearn. And Susan she's a design and architect and construction manager at Rush Hospital. She is an architect and lead AP. She has served as the project lead for many Rush's capital projects and clinics. Prior to her work, in healthcare, Susan held positions in the commercial, retail, hospitality sector. Her focus now includes the crossover of the industries, creating more wellness conscious experiences for patients and staff. Welcome.
Thank
I
you.
can't
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
No, not at all. I mean, I'm really excited, to hear what you're doing at Rush, especially, it's so important to talk about the wellness of not just the architecture, right? But also the wellness for the people using the building, using the spaces. And so let's talk about healthcare. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Susan, what you've been up to.
Yeah, I just want to mention a few things.
Mhm.
I did start in the hospitality sector. I guess it was be more retail design, multi-use, and really did a pivot at the economic downturn between jobs. I should mention that I got my health coaching certificate. So
Okay.
health has always kind of been a passion of mine, kind of a hobby. So I was doing some health coaching, helping people kind of with their nutrition for a couple of years. And then lo and behold, I applied for a job at Rush University Medical Center and really took a pivot from the commercial sector into healthcare. And it was a bit of a learning curve, I have to admit. There's a lot of very technical things in healthcare, but it was a good move for me, obviously. And now I kind of feel like I'm integrating that passion for health with architecture. And so I wanted to talk this morning about, looking inside the box, thinking inside the box, a catchy title to kind of get people's attention, but also to say, we can still think outside the box. I think that's a very valid way to look at projects and problems. But we should look inside the box too. And by that, I mean, what is the box? So maybe you want to just share your screen and show a few of those slides and we'll
Oh,
kind of,
yeah, sure.
um,
Yeah, for me, thinking outside of the box, it means bringing innovation and something new to an environment, any design strategy. And obviously, thinking inside the box, it's something that you understand and really zooming in on, for this instance, the occupant. And
right.
like you say, crossing over. So here we are. Can you see my screen?
Yes. There we go. Um, right. So you can go to the next slide, please.
Okay, I can keep
And the next
going.
kind of talk
Mhm,
that is.
mhm. Yeah, defining the boundaries, that's super important because
Right, it could be anything. I mean, and that's what's kind of cool about thinking inside the box is what is the box? So here we're just zooming in. And what I wanted to talk about today, which you've already mentioned is, the workplace. So the next slide should show Rush University Medical Center. This is
Yes.
a shot from the Eisenhower Expressway. I think most people are familiar with where Rush is. We're right on the Eisenhower and Ashland. And the building in the background is our newest building. It's known as the Tower or the Butterfly Building. About
Hmm.
2011, so it opened before I joined Rush, but it is a pretty amazing building. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward, but you can see how the buildings in the foreground are a lot older. And if you start at the tower and move this way, the atrium, I think, is about 50 years old, which is that other white building.
Mm-hmm.
And the building next to
Right
that,
here.
I think, is about 80 years old.
Mm.
And the ones right in the foreground are 100 years old. So we're dealing with a campus that has over 22 buildings, and they range in age like these do. So
That's incredible. So you have the great grandparents, the grandparents, and then
that's
you see the evolution of how Rush has grown over the history. And that's a really, yeah, I didn't realize it when I first saw this shot, but now it's like you see the evolution. And we're at the Bridgeport Arts Center, and we get to see the Butterfly Building from our window. So it's a beautiful skyline we have, but
well, it
yeah.
really put Rush on the map, I think,
Mm-hmm.
truly. And I have a few more slides that
Okay.
kind of show a little bit about the thinking that went into the tower. And I think this is common for other healthcare institutions, right? We're pretty good at looking at patients and providers. The patient, rooms now are comfortable even for the visitors. They have a place to sit and also even
Mm-hmm.
sleep. Recliners are in each room. The decor is nice. In this case, you've got this amazing view of downtown Chicago. So I think we do a pretty good job at that. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll show you something about the floor plan. Now, the butterfly, makes this amazing building form at a large scale for the highway passersby. But inside, it really did kind of come from the inside as a way to reduce the provider's steps. So if you look at the triangle
Mm-hmm.
within each butterfly wing, that is the nursing station and providers charting areas. So you can see how they're really close to the patient rooms, right? So
Yeah, that
um,
connection is important. I mean, not only for accessibility, right? But also visual. Try to get, you want access to all of your patients and stay connected with them.
exactly. And in COVID, this is kind of interesting. In COVID, we've tried to reduce the number of people in the nursing stations because they're pretty much on top of each other. They work very closely,
Mm-hmm.
and they do not want to be far from their patients. They do not want to move to a conference room in the core so that they can be 6 feet apart from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a real dedication. I mean, it just comes with the job, I think. But anyway, I just wanted to show this as a way that we have really taken providers' health into consideration when we've designed. And I think architects do this as routine, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, we definitely want to foster that connection and more in these types of facilities, where the patient needs a connection, where the family, of the patient wants that connection. So it's so important to have that. And, that's inside the box. And then thinking outside of the box, right? You want that connection, as you pointed out in the view from the room, that outside, what does that look like? What does that make you feel like too?
Right. I read something recently like, what makes a patient want to live? When
Mm,
um, if they're in a room that is very sterile, what is that saying to them? You know, it kind of dismisses a piece of their humanity. So I think that's, you know, kind of what we want to work toward in any space we design, but especially for the sick, and then especially for essential workers. I think we've kind of got a new term in essential workers due to COVID, right? We're really looking at people who have to show up and do show up despite the odds and risks of getting to work.
Right.
So I just want to show a few more slides
Okay.
about Rush. I'll just go through those, and then I want to go back to this, the other essential workers. But the Brennan Pavilion at Rush is the main entrance to the tower building, and you can see it's got this kind of terrarium type thing. It's actually open to the sky and lets natural light in, which is awesome. This is a ground floor space between other taller buildings, but also they grow things in here. The landscaping doesn't look too healthy in this shot, but actually a nice little space and really a unique feature. So, you know, introducing biophilic design as well as natural light into this space. And then I think the next shots just show a couple of things I saw recently in publications, examples of biophilic design that I thought were kind of interesting, and you know, ways to integrate biophilic design without just putting a picture of a flower on the wall, but
Right.
You know, the decor. And I think the tree, the column tree, is a children's facility. So I just thought that was a really playful way to bring biophilic in.
Yeah, and it's that innate need or that innate connection that we have as human beings to be connected to these sort of elements, these biophilic elements, whether it's color or texture, shadow, you know, and as architects, we have to be very intentful on how to make these environments intuitive to people walking through them. And, you know, it's a sort of also cues for wayfinding. I mean, you also have wayfinding, right, that you have to have in the hospital for somebody that may not be familiar with the floors or may not know the language. So how in design can we incorporate these intuitive cues to help patients and providers move through the building?
Yeah, I love that. That would be a whole other talk, Alicia.
Yes.
We'll put something together on that. I love that.
Let's see.
So the next one. Oh, this is just something I wanted to say too, because I think biophilic design is awesome, but I also think there's a way of acknowledging where a person is. Of course, we like to use the Rush Tower as kind of the iconic image for Rush, but we also then hone into a neighborhood for this picture. This was used as some of the art at our Rush River North clinic. So I think it's important to kind of say, hey, we're in your neighborhood. We know this is your neighborhood. We're Rush, we're this bigger entity, but we have, we know where you live, you know, and we know what that's about, and we're happy to be part of this community. Right, exactly.
So we have a compliment here. It says, Rush Brennan Pavilion is simply beautiful. Thank you, Veronica.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't.
But I mean, it's nice because if you have, you want that, you want to have those feelings. And I mean, who wants to go to a hospital, right? It's such an important, such an essential need, but you know, try to take away that stigma of what a hospital is. You go there because you're sick, and so how do you lessen that feeling, right? It's just you create a beautiful space, a very comforting and safe space.
Yeah, and I think too, there's kind of that balance between wanting it to look clean everyone wants to go to a clean hospital and one that has high technology, you know, the state-of-the-art technology. But how do you also make it feel warm? You know,
Yes.
so it's not as warm and comfy as a family room, but that it there's some balance there between comforts and definitely beauty. And I think we can't underestimate that in our designs, that beauty is important. You know, when you get to value engineering, like don't forget
Mhm.
to keep things beautiful. And even in some of these more technical areas, the imaging, X-ray and CT, you know, how do you add something beautiful to those spaces? And not just for the patients, but for the providers and people who are there, you know, every day.
Right. See what do we have here. Oh, back of us. Look at that stair.
Oh yeah, awful. But so I did want to talk about this because this speaks to our essential workers and what we're providing for them. And also just back of house people, there are a lot of people in a hospital, a lot of administrative staff that like to take the stairs, right? They sit at a desk all day. And if a stairwell looks like this, who really wants to use it?
Mhm.
Um, and some of the break rooms, this break room actually isn't that bad, but you know, we can do better.
Right. And, you mentioned something in our previous conversations about creating, not creating, but letting your staff and your providers know that they are valued, in the architecture as well. And I think that's so important. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's definitely brings up, the way a person works, right? It helps you not only retain providers, but attract providers depending on how the facility looks. Wouldn't you agree?
I do. I think employee engagement is huge. We all know that it's very costly and time consuming to hire new employees. Rush has over 10,000 employees. So just imagine, you know, that's that's a lot of people to um, make happy. But I think there
Mhm.
are some simple ways that sometimes go overlooked. If you want to go to the next slide, I can
Mhm.
just, oh, I just wanted to put in a plug for lab workers. You know, we're all
Mhm.
very conscious of COVID testing and we need more testing, but that means that people are living in these labs and they're working harder and they're under stress. Um,
Yeah.
Again, they need a certain level of technology and cleanliness, but how do we make those places more friendly? Or maybe it's in the break rooms or even in the common areas. I know at Rush, um, people take walks within the building because many of our buildings are connected by walkways on the fourth floor, and
Mhm.
they walk upstairs and downstairs and kind of make these internal routes, especially during this winter months. How do we make that awesome, you know, inspiring? How do we make it
Right.
inspiring workers so they feel refreshed when they go back to the lab or go back to their desk or go back to cleaning a room? You know, we have many in our janitorial staff who work 3 shifts. I mean, not the same worker, but there are 3 shifts, right? People are
Mhm.
cleaning the hospital around the clock. So what's it like for them?
Yeah, and it's so important. I mean, we spoke about, I mentioned the assessment that we did for the Field Museum last year, and
Right.
it was a 2-year assessment where we really looked into how they operate the back of house. And it was what we provided for them was a long-term um, utilization and space planning master plan. And I mean, every organization realizes that the employee, the visitor, needs to be valued, right, in order to be a successful organization. And so what we found is that, how do we make these employees happy, the staff happy? And you bring up such a great point by showing this shot of the laboratory, because the work is so intense and very important, that how do you then help that person just along, how do you make that environment just more comforting for them, so that they can get to their work, right? They can perform
Right.
their work at their optimum performance. And so
Right.
that's what we're trying to get at too with every project that we do. Like you also mentioned the stair. How do we make that more, lively? If it's by branding, and as the providers are taking the steps up, saying you are a hero, thank you. As you read up,
Right.
take the steps up, they can read and take pride in the space that they work in.
Yeah,
Oh.
absolutely. Um, yeah, I threw this in here because it's come up in a couple of things I've listened to recently. And even after I put the slide in, I heard someone else refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's
Mhm.
really up, I think, because of COVID, right? That at the
Yes.
bottom of the pyramid, obviously we need food, water, shelter, warmth, and rest, as it says here. Safety and security, I think this is really challenged these days, right? Do we feel safe? And the idea is that you can't move to the next level until the lower levels are met. Um, and I just wanted to do a shout out to you, Alicia, because along the belongingness and love needs in yellow, you
Mhm.
are helping facilitate that. I think that also includes work relationships, right? That you're connecting us in this way so that we don't feel as isolated. So we can listen to these talks and go, oh, yeah, that's what I think too, or I have different
Mhm.
opinions. Anyway, I just want to shout out to you because,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we can all, it's this cross collaboration that's needed within the field, right? And we spoke about it last week with Susan King, and, she mentioned that she's just a natural collaborator. But as architects, we want to do that. We want to create these meaningful connections and space, and in a space that brings people joy. Who wants to be in a space that doesn't bring you joy?
right, if you're just doing the checklist, Um, so here's another slide, I think, of a good staircase. This happens to be at the Merchandise Mart. I've called this a healthy nudge because you can see
Hmm.
that they've numbered the steps to kind of get you to count your steps up. And of course, there's many floors at the Merchandise Mart, so this goes up.
Yes.
They're also super clean,
Hmm.
super simple, but bright colors. I don't think this took a lot of money to do. But the Merchandise Mart is a very old building, and to have a stairwell that looks like this, I think these are both from Merchandise Mart. It's pretty
Mm.
awesome.
Yeah, they look familiar. I've taken those stairwells
Yeah,
often.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And they're well lit. That's the other thing.
Yes,
And so that makes a difference too. When their stairwell is well lit, you feel, going back to the safety, safety of, walking down the stairs, or just if you're alone in the stairwell, right?
absolutely, yeah. But these are very friendly places, I think, even though
Hmm.
they're really done. And
That
this,
psychological piece.
yeah, I mean, and I think we talked about how in new buildings, when you're designing, you can make the stair a feature, right? Instead of hiding it, you put it in the center of the building and get people to walk the stairs that way. But in
Yes.
new buildings, you have to get creative on how you're going to, make them appealing and feel safe. So I just threw this in because this is a little known walking path.
Okay.
Um, but there is walk that's been designed around Rush, and there are several gardens
Mm.
that are nice respites for people. Um, I think this goes to the point that this really hasn't been socialized at Rush, that we kind of need a campaign, you know, and it does take time and energy to do that, to get the word out. So I think that's something I need to put on my list to do, to really get this socialized so that people are using it at Rush and
You need to add like ice cream carts or something at the
Yeah,
different
well, we still have food trucks, right? Have a food truck location.
a little food cart, or you know, have popsicles and
Yes,
give people
exactly. I love
incentives
that.
to
See,
walk.
collaboration.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I like that.
So, and this is just another thought that I really wanted to integrate into our stairwells at Rush, to do more of a excuse me, community-based mural that really speaks to the diversity at Rush. And we do have a very robust diversity program and outreach program to the south and west sides, because those are really our neighborhoods. But do we speak to that on the inside of the box, inside Rush? We have a very diverse workforce, and I think it would be nice to make a nod, along with our corporate branding, which I've put up here, but to have something that might even be done by a group of artists who work at Rush, who, you know, happen to be artists. So that's also on my list. I'd like to get moving.
That's great.
But it all speaks to employee engagement. And you spoke about joy. You know, I think joy is in a lot of conversations these days. And I don't know if you're familiar with Joyful. It's a book by Ingrid Fettel-Lee.
No, I'm not.
She spoke, I happen to have it right here. It looks like this. Little plug for her, but she spoke at the Healthcare Design Conference a couple years ago. She was the keynote speaker, and I have to admit, I was a little bit like, oh, come on, what's she going to talk about? But she's really done extensive research. It was the most interesting talk, and I won't go into everything here, but she did come up with these 7 things that seem to be universal joy creators for people. Bubbles, rainbows, tree houses, swimming pools, hot air balloons, sprinkles, and googly eyes. Not beer, although some people would put beer up
argue
at the top
with that one. I would add butterflies to it too. Everybody smiles when they see a butterfly.
Right? Well, of course, for you, yeah. But I just don't think you can underestimate adding this to your list of objectives for a space. And she has data that in communities where they've painted buildings bright colors, crime has gone down. So there is a line to bettering the community, right? There is a connection, a correlation that designing with these things in mind really can make a big effect in society.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always like to give the example, even when you're at home, it's like if you paint the wall, this a color you selected, your favorite color, how does that make you feel, right? Even in your own home, like what does a concrete floor feel versus a wooden floor? But what is joy and comfort? That's what it's about. And speaking of books, I actually have exciting news to share.
Oh my gosh.
Tomorrow, we are launching a book that I was selected to be a part of. It was a national campaign, and they selected me as one of the co-authors. And I chose to write about why I do architecture in connection with nature. And it talks about my journey as an architect, entrepreneur, and connection with nature. So tomorrow is a big day. Stay tuned. Thank you. Thank you.
What's
It's very
it called?
exciting. It's called Hispanic Star Rising. So tomorrow is a kickoff of Hispanic Heritage Month.
Oh, wow.
and they're going to launch it tomorrow. It's a movement with Hispanic stars. Mhm.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and I just feel so lucky to have had that opportunity to talk about architecture and to talk about designing healthy environments, because what we're trying to do is reduce carbon emissions. We're in the midst of a climate crisis right now.
Mm,
And if we're not getting the message right now, right, that we're sheltered in place and seeing the impacts of us being at home, traveling less, and looking at the impacts of buildings, how they are used and not used. There's so many empty buildings right now, and and then transportation, and yet another talk, right?
yeah.
But we have seen how the air has gotten cleaner, the water is cleaner, and it's time to take a couple of steps back and see that, you know what, we can change our behavior. We've been challenged, and we need to accept that challenge to make a positive impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if this isn't the time, one is the time. You're right, to really look at these things. And, I think too that I did want to mention before we're out of time that, everyone matters, right? All of us as designers matter, and everything we do matters. The care we take in our designs, but also the care we take of ourselves. So this is my little health coaching
Mhm.
pitch, is that, um, as my yoga teacher said, grant yourself the luxury of looking within. Give
Mhm.
yourself some time to reflect and to take care of yourself and your essence and your soul. And I just read a statistic this morning that I think through the CDC, 40% of people are reporting that they have some sort of mental challenge, that they're depressed or something else. I mean, those of us who have our jobs have another kind of stress, and those of us who were let go and laid off have, stresses as well. And um, I just think self-care is super important no matter where you are.
It is.
And even though we're at home, and if we are working from home, we should have more time. I think often we don't, because we're kind of stressing about not knowing. And there's another interesting correlation of the less control a person has, as your sense of control decreases, your sense of stress goes up. So it's not,
Right.
uh, it's just an important thing to know. So ways that we can give people control, I mean, as we talked about, some of those um, nods toward healthiness in the workforce, in the workplace, but also just taking time for oneself, really honoring yourself and knowing that what you do for yourself, but also in your work, matters. And I think my last slide, which you don't have to show, is
Mhm.
of a pebble, dropping into a pond, and that ripple effect. And I just think that's such a strong image, especially now when we're separate from people, but knowing that what we do matters, and it does ripple out, even though you might not know where it ever lands.
It
Um,
does. Mhm.
Everything we do and say is important.
Yes, yes. And so, I'm so happy to have had this time with you to learn about, the stuff that you're doing at Rush and what you're planning. And I think I'm going to look forward to these maybe little food carts at the gardens I'm going to advocate for that because, you know, at one point or another, I think many of us who are watching do go to Rush, you know, for a check-in, for to see a new baby, or to see, you know, both my nephew and my niece were born there. My father had open heart surgery there, and so I've spent many times, a lot of time in the cafeteria at Obompan, and
Right.
there's that experience too. So, you know, it's nice to see how it's evolved. And I'm gonna call that first image that you showed of the evolution. That's the Rush family portrait. You know, it shows all of the
I love that.
how it's evolved. But thank you so much, Susan. Do you have any other words before we sign off this morning?
I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, and it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, yes, for me as well, to talk about designing healthy environments. I mean, this is why it was created, to stay connected, to share information. And next week we have biologist Juan Robalo, and he's a senior ecologist and integrated design specialist. So I cannot wait to speak to him, how he uses his expertise in the design world. So everybody tune in, and have a wonderful and healthy day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.